Like, I knew Kyoshi was tall, but did you know she was 7 feet tall and lived to be 230 years old? Nick, she's not just the Avatar, she's a goddess. Yeah, Kyoshi is the best Avatar.
Yeah, Jacoby, she's a real fan favorite. Get it?
Hello everyone, welcome to CBR Saga, the only CBR podcast sponsored by Cabbage Corp. Need a gift for that special someone? Give them the gift of cabbage. Just not that one, that's my cabbage. Anyways, corporate sponsorship out of the way, today on CBR Saga, we're talking about the greatest Avatar of all time. Yeah, I said it, Avatar Kyoshi. With the news of Avatar Studios officially opening up and new Avatar content on the way, it's only a matter of time before we see Kyoshi's story told on screen. And it absolutely should. It's amazing. But now the big question is, what would a Kyoshi series look like? Will it explore her past that's already well documented in the novels? Or will it tell a new story from a chunk of Kyoshi's life we don't know? Well, that's what we're here today to discuss, so let's get into it right now. I'm joined by my co-host, Nick. Nick, how you doing today?
Doing good, Jacoby. Nice to be here.
All right, you excited to talk about some Kyoshi?
Absolutely, because I love Kyoshi, but I didn't know a whole lot about Kyoshi until, finding out about her backstory, and I really don't think you're wrong when you say best Avatar.
She is. She's gone through so much, and I think her type of backstory, even from what we know, would make a great series going forward. So that's how we're going to structure this today. The first part is going to be exploring the origins that we know and talking about why that would make a good series to see. And then we're going to move into what a series could look like, exploring a chunk of Kyoshi's life we don't know. So let's get into what we do know, because her backstory has been pretty well documented, at least at an early age, thanks to novels like The Rise of Kyoshi and The Shadow of Kyoshi. And both of those are fascinating, don't you think? Like all the information they reveal about her backstories, because Kyoshi has one of the most interesting starts to any Avatar ship. I don't even know if that's the proper way to say that, but that's what I'm calling it. Any start to any Avatar ship, I think of any Avatars, because her parents were criminals. I mean, Jessa was this renegade air nomad, and her father was this Earth Kingdom actor, and they led this thing called the Flying Opera Company. And when you hear that, you think of something, oh, that's kind of fun, that's neat, but it's actually a huge crime network. I mean, like, what do you think of an Avatar with criminals as parents?
Yeah, it definitely cuts against not only the typical like Avatar origin story, but it also cuts against the typical like hero origin story. Because when you see someone like Aang or like Korra, I believe, who they're born, they are believed to be the Avatar, and then they are raised as such until something goes wrong in their life. Whereas Kyoshi sort of had this sort of opposite origin. She grew up raised by people who were not good people. They committed crimes. They created crime organizations. It's not the typical hero journey. Usually the hero has parents or role models that they have from the beginning that they can follow and teach them how to be a hero, but she sort of had to grow into that.
Yeah, because they left her in this town just to be like, they thought they were leaving her with somebody who would kind of take care of her, but then as soon as they left, that guy was like, nope, and like kicked her out on the streets, and then she was just like, she survived by eating garbage, Nick. The Avatar, the most powerful being in the world, survived by eating garbage on the streets, and everyone disliked her. And you think that's got to like frame her, mindset going forward of just like the type of person she is. And that's totally true, because it does as she continues her own sense of justice and how she helps people going forward. But exactly, it's like what you said. It's like a lot of like both Korra and Aang, when they knew they were the Avatar and then they were raised as such, but not Kyoshi, because here's the really interesting thing I always think about Kyoshi is that she wasn't identified. There was a mistake. There's these two people, Jiansu and Kelsang, these two masters who were searching for the Avatar, and due to these like wacky misunderstandings, they actually misidentified the Avatar, and actually was called this Earth bender named Yoon was the Avatar, and then like they raised him as such. So it's like a lot of time was spent to Yoon, building up to be this Avatar. They were even building like an Avatar mansion, basically, for him to train in. And lo and behold, who gets hired to work in that mansion as Yoon's servant? It's Kyoshi. I mean, like that right there, I think is such an interesting setup for a series, at least for like a season 1 But I'm curious on your thoughts of like, would that storyline be interesting to see, or would it kind of ruin the experience knowing that, yeah, Kyoshi's the Avatar, so it's like we're spending a lot of time watching her find out she's the Avatar. Do you see what I'm saying? Does that kind of ruin the suspense, I guess?
I see what you're saying, and no, I don't think it does. I think you can tell. I think that's why prequel movies work sometimes. It's because, like, we know the story that's happened, but it's still such an interesting story that we want to see it play out. And prequel series, they do the same thing. I think it's really interesting because the Avatar, in a sense, in the world, is also a celebrity, beyond being, like, the biggest, the most powerful being. Everyone sort of knows what the Avatar is, and if you are known to be the Avatar, everyone knows you, so there's almost this celebrity-esque thing to it, which really plays out when they think Yoon is it, and they build him a mansion and all these extravagant like training facilities and things like that. So it's really interesting to see that the true Avatar is actually one who comes from the humblest of beginnings. Like, I can't think of more humble beginnings than being kicked out on the street by a person who you were basically sold to by your parents and being forced to eat garbage to survive, only to be hired to be a servant to this person that is supposed to be this large celebrity-like figure.
I know.
So I think the story alone is worth seeing, even if we know where we end up. It's not about where we end up in prequel movies and series. It's about the journey to get there, and I think this journey is definitely worth seeing.
And to add to that point, I think another reason of why it would be great to see, because this is a great origin story, not just for Kyoshi, but as a villain, because as time goes on, you know, Yoon does, after a whole series of shenanigans take place, Yoon is a bad guy, like, ultimately. Like, he could be the ultimate big bad if Kyoshi was this 3-season arc of telling Kyoshi's life, and you establish Yoon as like this opening guy, as like a guy he's nice. Like, I guess he's a little messy, but he does, you know, he is a good person at the start, and he kind of has a relationship with Kyoshi. Like, they almost have a relationship, but they realize it's like, oh, it's probably wrong if we do this, so we should remain friends. But like, you establish that connection of Yoon being a good guy, and then later on in like a later season or so, when Yoon does come back as a villain after being totally just betrayed and destroyed and kind of corrupted in a sense, and overcome by vengeance. I mean, that creates a great bookend, right? From like season 1 to like season 3 of like, that could create not only a great story for Kyoshi, but like the greatest villain story, I think, of any Avatar series that we've seen.
I agree, and honestly, it reminds me a lot of someone like Loki, someone who is promised something as a child, only to find out that thing belongs to someone else. Like, Yoon is promised this life as the Avatar, like this life of responsibility and of riches and of fame and all these things, and that gets taken away from him. So I think, because it's cool, because they do start out as friends, almost like you said, being in a relationship. So it would be cool to see that rage, that blind anger of something that was promised to him being taken away, and seeing it overcome him, seeing it go against those things that we knew him at the beginning, he would be different at the end.
Yeah, exactly. And just the way they could set it up, I think, is so cool, because Jiansu, it's like, starts off as kind of her mentor, but then turns into a villain. He could be like the seasons 1 through 2. Like, he starts out, both Yoon and Jiansu start out good guys in season 1. Jiansu is more the villain for season 2, and then season 3 is because obviously it ends with Kyoshi has this battle with Jiansu after he becomes so corrupt, and after Jiansu murders her other mentor Kelsang, and it leads to this epic showdown, and then Yoon returns after being, you know, basically sacrificed to like this big evil spirit by Jiansu. And then he could be the setup for season 3. I think the structure that you have there is great. And I'm thinking in 3-season terms, because that's just like what I'm used to with like Avatar: The Last Airbender. I guess it could be anything. It's like, because as much, and I love Kyoshi, and as much as I think there's value in doing like few seasons or 1 season at a time for like different avatars, I think Kyoshi has such a rich background that you can't do it in 1 season. What do you think? I
actually was thinking the same thing in terms of a 3-season structure, because I think it'd be really cool to set up Jiansu as like the big villain. Like, oh, this is the villain that is going to be the final, this is the Ozai, this is the final fight at the end. But if you sort of flip that on its head, because there's a moment when Kyoshi finally does confront Jiansu after he's betrayed her and killed her mentor and done all these terrible things, where they sort of stalemate, and then Yoon comes in and basically puts a rock through his chest. And I think that's the perfect way to like season finale of season 2. And then you're right, you set up this search for Yoon. It's almost like a search to save his soul, but he's so far gone that you actually have to fight him at the end. So I think that 3-season structure would work perfectly for Kyoshi, and you can spend most of season 1 and season 2 going over Kyoshi's character and getting her to grow and getting her to interact with other characters, especially the ones on her team Avatar.
Exactly. And also what I love about that is like how it compares to Aang's journey, because as Kyoshi's stories ends with Yoon, it's like she does kill him. She kills him horribly. She like freezes his heart and lungs like in his chest to like kill him. Like, and she regrets the fact that, you know, she couldn't save her friend. And that's such a stark contrast to what we like kind of expect from the Avatar because of Aang, because, you know, he was always the one who's just like, I'm going to find another way, right? And then he got the Deus Ex Machina of energy bending like given to him because he didn't want to kill the Fire Lord Ozai. But now we're going to be in a situation where, yeah, the Avatar does have to make the difficult choice. And as much as she doesn't want to, the world that she's grew up in, you know, from eating garbage on the streets to being a world that like kind of shuns her, because her world is super corrupt at this time. Like everything that she does and tries to do is just filled with corruption and where she has to use force to do it. Like she's basically molded into this person who has to make the difficult choice to kill someone who is her former friend. And that's such a sad finale and such an epic finale, and I love it so much.
Yeah, no, it's great because it's not only, it's in stark contrast to Aang, it's in stark contrast to Roku. Roku couldn't kill his friend and do what needed to be done. Instead, he let him live, and then that wound up biting him in the butt. Aang couldn't even kill his enemy. Aang needed to find a way around that. So yeah, it's a really different, unique character, and it makes sense knowing where she came from, knowing what she had to do to survive as a young child.
And this is why I'm so torn, because now I guess we can move into the next part. Because this is all Kyoshi's backstory that we know and has been told in the story before. And while it would be epic to see on screen, we know it, right? We're supposed to know it. So is there more value in having a show that, because all this backstory takes place when she's like a teenager, right? All this from what we know here. But then Kyoshi lives an exceptionally long life, and I feel like it would be wrong to not take advantage of that. For being like the oldest human ever at 230 years old, because she does so much in her life. Like she establishes, you know, the Kyoshi warriors of everything. She establishes the Dai Li. You know, she stops Chin the Conqueror, which we saw a little bit in Avatar: The Last Airbender. There is so much to her life that I'm wondering if there's not more value in looking at a period that we don't know to learn more about her characters. Like maybe you could frame it in a way where you can you tell this kind of one season story, but like with flashbacks to her childhood, like not hinting at everything, but like kind of hinting that there was this tragedy to form audiences of her character, but also telling a new story. I mean, like, what do you think what are your thoughts on that?
Because honestly, that story when she's a teenager is so rich and so great. So even if we like start there and do a season and explain that story, and then the next season we skip to a time we don't know about. Because you're right, 200 years of being the Avatar, she clearly did something right, and there's a lot of room to wiggle there. There's also a lot of story in there that hasn't been set. We don't know what it is, so it's literally the creative mind's story for the taking.
Yeah, and it's so tough because I don't know if you could have a full season or just a season of Avatar just showing her full life, because there's so much to it. So it's like, I don't know though, but do you think that could work if there is a 22 episode Kyoshi series that documents her life from start to finish? Maybe it's told in a special way with like flashbacks and everything like that. But basically, it's telling her whole life. I mean, like, do you think that's even possible in one season? Like, if very briefly, I guess.
Not her whole life. Listen, if you're alive for 230 years, there's got to be like a year or two in there where you're just sort of taking it easy and kicking your feet up. So
it's like, I need a break after all this.
Yeah, I don't know that every moment of her life would be the most interesting thing to see, but just knowing the way her life started makes me really curious about, there had to be other moments in those 200 years following, you know, the beginning of her story, that I would want to see.
I agree with that, because I'm trying to think of what I would be most interested in. It's like, honestly, it's like I'm very interested in the Dai Li creation, because I love the Dai Li in both Last Airbender and Legend of Korra, how they're just always bad. They're always kind of these corrupt people. So I think it would be really interesting to see what they were like when she was actually forming them, and seeing her deal with the mass corruption of the time to try to establish this Earth Kingdom police force that deals with corruption, and then knowing that they eventually become corrupt themselves. I mean, I think that's one of the storylines that I'm interested in.
That sounds really interesting, and I would also want to see that. What I really want to see, though, is an Avatar act differently than the Avatars we've seen. And I think the best way to do that, because there's a part of her backstory that I find insanely interesting. We know her parents were thieves. We know she joined up with the organization, the crime organization that her parents started.
Right.
And that became her team Avatar. There's a really interesting part where she's secretly learning how to be an assassin from one of those members. I want to see, and there's this whole point where she goes to the Southern Air Temple, and she's sort of this like renegade Avatar almost. I want to see a portion of her life where she's like a bounty hunter, where she's like an Avatar for hire. Now, we have no reason to believe this portion of her life exists, but I think, like we said, 200 years, there's a lot of room to play with. I want to see her go through this sort of moment where she's like, okay, the world is too corrupt. I give up for a brief period of time. Pay me. I want to be rich. I want to use my bending to my ability, only for her to come out even stronger to see how that was wrong and how she made a mistake there, because she even admits to Aang, talking about the Dai Li, that she made mistakes in her life.
Oh man, that's actually really cool, because I love that. Because what I think that could do is present, again, a different side of the Avatar. It's like close to like the dark Avatar, which kind of was hinted at in Legend of Korra in season 2. With Unalaq wanting to become the dark Avatar. But like this gives us an opportunity to present an Avatar that's not fully bad, but just uses the powers to like live in the world that they exist in, and what that looks like. Because you're right, I think that would be fascinating. I think that sort of character development would be better than what they tried to do with Korra, because I love Korra, I guess, as a character, but I get that she was stubborn, she was headstrong, and she was going to do what she wanted, and she required a lot of training, and that was like her whole thing from the start of the series. And I think at some points, the show didn't know how to fully make that character work in terms of she's supposed to be stubborn and hard-headed and not lacking in her convictions. Like, she would always do what she wants, and very angry sometimes and have a temper. And that was supposed to be her thing, because she was supposed to learn how to be calm and how to be the Avatar and be peaceful. But the problem with that was it sometimes veered into unlikability for Korra, because there was nothing likable about that sort of character to be around. You just kind of grown. It's like, Korra, come on, like, like shape up a little bit here. Like people are trying to teach you, and that reflected negatively on Korra. But I think you can do a similar type of character with Kyoshi, of just like by painting the world around her as corrupt as well, so she has to adapt to it. Because that was I think Korra's problem. She was surrounded by all these great people who wanted to teach her, and all of her friends and everything like that, and everything was great for her. But if you go to Kyoshi's time, where literally the whole world is corrupt, and it doesn't look like there's not a whole lot that can be done, that she has to use force and her judgment to deliver justice. I love it. Let's create that Kyoshi series. Nick, let's you and I try to get hired at the Avatar Studios and try to pitch them these series about make them do Kyoshi stuff, because that's why it's great, because we may not know what Avatar Studios is planning just yet, but just like I really think there's value in telling Kyoshi stories, even if just exploring all these past Avatars, even if it's not just Kyoshi. I think there's just such a big history of the Avatar, and telling these individual, maybe. Again, I don't know if Kyoshi would work as an individual season, but if it does, like if there's just a certain section of her life, then maybe. And then we can continue on that trend. We could have every, year or so, it's like an anthology, right? Like every season is just telling us a little bit about one defining moment in each Avatar's life. Like you could have a season of Kyoshi establishing, the Dai Li about in the world of corruption, or, as an example. And then, you could have you could tell Kurik's story, because Kurik didn't live very long. He died very prematurely. And he had his love's face stolen by the face stealing demon. So that's a great story to tell over a season, right? And maybe even a little bit, you can go in the future, because his spirit's still kind of looking for her, which is great. But like, you just have such an opportunity to play around with Avatar without affecting the main lore. All you do is highlight different avatars at certain periods of time, and you got yourself a consistent output of great stuff that people want to watch.
Absolutely. No, I totally agree, because not only is each avatar different in how they sort of handle the realization of becoming the avatar, because that's a crazy thing. Like, I cannot imagine being told one day, hey, by the way, you're the most powerful being in the world, and it's like you're sort of your destiny to like balance the world and stuff.
Yeah, good luck.
I can't really picture that, so that's just a fascinating thing to see play out on screen and see that avatars have handled it differently. What else is cool is what we've sort of talked about with Kyoshi, is that the world was different at all these different stages, which would have to make the characters different, because they'd have to respond, even if they were the same character, they would be responding to these situations differently.
I agree. I just think there's so much you can do with the Avatar world, and I'm so excited to see what Avatar Studios does next for them. I really hope it's Kyoshi, because as we talked about today, Kyoshi is awesome, and we love Kyoshi. Nick, how would you like to be a Kyoshi warrior kind of with me? Because I think I'm in the Kyoshi fan club definitely now.
Oh, I'm in. I'm down. Let's do it.
Thank you. Anybody else who wants to join, just let us know down in the comments below. Thank you all very much for watching CBR Saga, the CBR podcast, and we'll be back next time with another exciting episode of awesome stuff. Thank you all very much. See you next time.